All right, so question for you. Back to my coffee cup. What is holding?
Real.
What's that?
It's not real.
It's not real. Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
Can of beer
Rene Descartes. It does.
with a
doesn't it?
handle.
All right. Well, what's holding the coffee in the cup?
Force.
The cup, right?
Force.
The force, right? Yeah, Master Yoda would say the force, ultimately. Well, that's interesting. We can get to that. So the cup is holding the coffee. We kind of went over this maybe a couple weeks ago, but I want to put a little better spin on it. What's holding up the coffee in the cup? Air hockey table. What's holding the air hockey table up?
The legs.
The legs. What's holding the legs of the air hockey table up? The floor.
What's holding the floor
Foundation.
up?
What is holding the floor up?
The earth.
Foundation. Okay. What's holding the foundation up?
The earth.
The earth. What's holding the earth up?
Gravity.
Right. The astrophysical forces that cause planets to do what they do. What's holding the astrophysical forces in the universe together?
What?
Huh?
What?
What's holding the universe? I mean, come on, people. It's obvious that something's holding this coffee in here. What's holding the universe?
God's sin.
Well, it's got to be something, doesn't it? We would never say that this coffee is just sitting in this form of this cylinder by virtue of nothing that we can explain, right? It's got to be something. It can't be nothing. We would never treat it. We would never try to explain anything else like that, would we? Even if we didn't know the explanation, we wouldn't say, "Well, it can't. It's got to be nothing. It's got to be something." You got to. No, it's spilling. Oh, it's hanging on you.
Chair of shame.
No,
Chair
that
shame
chair
does.
right there. Chair shame.
So the point I'm getting at here is this is what I was trying to get at last week, and I wasn't quite getting there, but I did a little reading on this. And so you've got the cup, the table, the legs, the floor, the foundation, the earth, the universe, right?
I hope the universe is bigger.
Wow. But you get the idea.
Shouldn't that be the infinity?
I'm sorry, what?
Shouldn't that be the infinity?
Maybe. All right.
Looks like a man with bow tie. Stop that.
But something's got to be holding the universe up, right? And this is all going on simultaneously, right? It's a hierarchical notion. Yes, Isaac.
Like a weird bow tie also.
Yeah,
An infinite bow tie.
the infinite bow tie, right? So we can think about cause happening in a linear fashion and go back to the Big Bang or something, right? And try to explain things that way. But this is really the more powerful argument. Because if something's holding this coffee together and we can explain it by the cup, then we are forced to say there has to be something right now at this moment holding this universe together.
Gravity.
No, something's holding gravity together.
That's actually that's a good point though. That often what the atheist will resort to is the laws,
Right?
the laws of the universe. Why?
Right. But who's holding?
Who made up the
Why?
laws?
Well, yeah, who made up the laws? But then also, why would we expect there to be consistent laws? That's sort of an absurd conceit.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the cup just fall apart tomorrow?
Right.
The coffee flowed out of it the next day.
You know what? You know what's holding up gravity? Science.
Well, what's holding it aside, right? So anyway, so that's pretty interesting and encouraging if you think about it. You're not just walking around this world, without some sort of foundation. Okay. this this God we know through Holy Scripture and through really philosophy as well here, as Aristotle demonstrates to us. This is really an Aristotelian argument picked up later by Aquinas. But, it's comforting to know that we're not just standing on thin air. The cup's not just suspended here, and you're hoping it's going to, as Mr. Pullman just pointed out, may or may not be predictable the next time we come around to it. Okay. So this hierarchical idea of God being involved, God having to be a personally involved God, not just a watchmaker type of God who wound up the universe and let it go. It can't be that way. Philosophically, it has to be this way. All right? Makes sense? Okay. So, just wanted to start off there and get that piece in. All right, so let's go and finish this out today if we can. Incidentally, you guys all forgot your copies of the Extrabiblical Evidence for the Existence of Christ, so make sure you pick that up on your way out today. I can't send you that by email if you'd like to. One day, I got a hunch one day one of you guys will go, hey, I'll get an email from one of you people sometime in the future saying, hey, can you send me blah, blah, blah? I'm going to be like, who are you again? Oh, yeah, like 100 years ago, you said something like this. Okay. Now I've got some weird pushing. All right, so what we saw through this extra biblical evidence was that there undisputedly was a person they called Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified by the Roman government. Okay, there's just nobody with any amount of... Isaac, stop doing that. It's probably annoying to the boy sitting next to you. There's no credible historian or anyone who studies this who just has any other leg to stand on. Okay. From even those extra biblical accounts that we saw, we see that a lot of what was written about was Jesus' followers having experiences with the resurrected Christ. Okay, now we see this in 1 Corinthians 15. We've read that to kind of just start the thing on up here. But we also see from the extra biblical evidence that Jesus' followers had experiences. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that Jesus rose from the dead bodily, as the scriptures proclaim. All it means is that it's pretty clear that something happened. And again, all scholars, whether secular or Christian, will agree with this point. If they're honest. We also see from Josephus, as well as the scriptures, that James, the brother of Jesus, was a skeptic. So the argument here is, okay, yes, this guy Jesus was crucified by the Romans, so what? That didn't mean anything. True enough. And then you go, well, we've got a bunch of evidence that his followers, after he was crucified, had experiences. And people will then say, well, people that are, if you have a close, say a close relative die, tragic, people will have, out of their grief, they'll think they'll see the person. You've heard these stories. And some people believe in ghosts, and you can kind of make your, you can manipulate, the human mind can be manipulated to believe a lot of things, even see things that aren't real. Especially if you're open to the experience. You guys ever watch these what do they call them? They call them mentalists. You ever watch these cats? They can if you're open to the experience, that's what they'll say to you. They'll say, hey, are you open to the experience? And if you are, they can manipulate you into giving them information or believing something or so on and so forth. Yeah, you gotta check, at some point. They're in there.
So it's hypnotism.
No, it's not hypnotism. It's pure tricks. It's tricks. I've heard these guys talk, and they'll tell you how they do what they do. There's nothing magical or hypnotic about it at all.
But hypnosis they use similar techniques.
Right.
Hypnosis does the same thing. It's just techniques. It's not magical.
Right.
It's just techniques that we can use to manipulate your brain.
Right.
And that's actually how a bunch of people explain these experiences.
Right.
Is they say, look, yeah, so Paul's a charismatic guy, or Peter, or whoever, and he convinced a whole bunch of people that they experienced this thing.
Right.
You know, there's cults, right?
Yeah.
They do the same thing.
Yeah. Right. Well, and you hear these stories about, you know, the stigmata. You guys know what this is? You'll have people who will have the wounds of Christ appear on their bodies, and these sorts of things. You'll have statues of Mary crying blood. These, you know, just weird stuff like this. Okay. And you'll have 200-300 people witnessing stuff like this. Okay. No, they're open to the experience. So people will argue, and Mr. Pullman pointed out, hey, same thing going on here. And then you come along and you say, not so fast. We've got Josephus testifying to James. And again, as we already pointed out, if Alex claimed to be the second coming of Christ, Nadia would be extremely skeptical, I would think.
I think we all would.
Yeah, I think we all would. Right. But if he was put to lethal injection and rose from the dead 3 days later, we all might take pause to raise an eyebrow at that situation. Okay?
People still wouldn't believe it.
Some people wouldn't. That's true.
A former to rise from the dead.
So we have an extreme skeptic. The problem, and that's what's really, I think, so powerful about the testimony of both Josephus and the scriptures about James, Jesus' brother, converting. Because even, just like you guys said, like Caleb said, I'm still not sure I would believe it. Because you're so close to the situation. Yeah, go ahead.
It's happened before, right? Like,
What's happened before?
I think I've heard of something where this woman, she died and she said that she saw the gates of heaven and they were closed, and so she woke up.
Oh, okay. Oh, near-death experience stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure how credible that stuff is, but
Even that stuff, but that's like, I think the longest anybody's gone is in like 20 minutes, where their heart has been stopped and then they came back. You get stabbed in the heart with a spear and then are dead for 3 days and then come back, come talk to me.
Yeah, right.
I don't know your heart.
Yeah. Give me 48 hours.
Yeah, at least.
Somebody 48 hours dead, then you got something to go on. So at any rate, that testimony is powerful. Yeah.
Did we ever read the passages of, I can't remember if we went through how we know that his brother is a skeptic.
John.
There's a couple of places where they go.
There are. Is it John 8, John 7? It's in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Let me look. Hang on. I have it right here, actually. Hang on a second. Should have it right here. Just a minute. St. James. Dang it. I don't. I have these in so many different notes.
Anyway, I just wanted to point out that not only does his brother not believe him, right? Like Nadia's not going to believe Alex.
Right.
But they call him a lunatic. They say he's crazy.
Right.
And they try to actually basically arrest him. They try to physically restrain him from going around and talking anymore. His brothers do this, or a part of the crowd that does this anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, I don't really believe you. It's like, no, you're a crazy man. Stop.
Right.
You're embarrassing the family.
Right.
We're gonna lock you up.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, Jesus testifies to this. Prophet's not welcome in his hometown.
Right.
That's the thing is, if I started proclaiming that I was the Christ and I went back to my little hometown in Oklahoma, they would be like, we know you.
Yeah.
You're that stupid kid that used to, do this and that and the other thing, right? Okay. All right. So, and then on top of that, there's just, the evidence for Jesus, for St. James being a skeptic for him being a skeptic is a little bit scant. There's not a ton of stuff that shows us that. Okay. It's a little bit thin, but again, there's enough evidence that scholars are willing to grant that point if they're honest. But if they're not willing to grant at least this point, they have to grant St. Paul. St. Paul there's no question, St. Paul was a persecutor of the church, participated with the Jewish rulers of the day to have Christians rounded up and imprisoned, persecuted, murdered, etc. Right, and we see this right in 1 Corinthians 15. Notice that we are tracking right with the text of 1 Corinthians 15. Ehrman in his latest book argues that Paul, because he was thinking about Jesus so much, had a hallucination about him. He might have felt psychologically guilty for persecuting Christians, and therefore had a vision of his resurrection.
I can't listen to these without thinking of Hans Feeney's video.
Right?
Best conspiracy ever.
Yeah. So, but the problem with that is that you have to think about. You guys remember? I'll have to bring that up again. I'll bring that up again next week. You guys remember that video we watched last year where you sent this to me. It's on the resurrection, but I think it's St. Paul trying to, or St.
Peter trying to convince Paul that they start this conspiracy.
Right.
About how Jesus rose from the dead, even though they both know he really didn't.
Right.
And Peter says a bunch of things like, "Oh, wait, won't they be able to disprove that in like 3 seconds by walking down to his tomb?"
Right.
He says, "No, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it." And then but one of the things he says is, "So let me get this straight. I'm going to give up my rock star status among the Jews, and my fame and my wealth, in order to be beaten, persecuted, killed twice, and basically have no money. And wait, we don't get anything out of this?"
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Best conspiracy ever.
Yeah. That's the thing that has. Right. That's the thing that
nothing he gets. He has everything, and then he gets nothing. Right. Anyway, it's ridiculous. Over a hallucination. And I'm like, man, I had a bad shroom trip.
Right.
I'm just gonna keep going. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that's bedeviled scholars for 2,000 years. Is it would make sense if you were following a revolutionary leader who promised you political power, right? Like, hey, we're going to overthrow the oppressors. We're going to be the ones that are in charge, and so come join me, right? That would make sense. But as that video we watched a year ago, and I'll bring that back up. We'll watch it next week or something. As that video demonstrates, starting the Christian movement had no such promise of political power. It only promised persecution. And St. Paul, again, was a Pharisee of Pharisees, as he testifies. He had prominent status among the Jews, which means, and the Pharisees, generally speaking, were fairly wealthy individuals. He also was a Roman citizen, which granted him all kinds of other rights and privileges. So he laid all that on the line for a hallucination. Now, granted, sometimes, psychological breaks can be so powerful. It is a possibility, but you have to weigh the evidence. You have to say, okay, we've got this stack of evidence. Let's stack it against the likelihood that a hallucination would cause a man of St. Paul's stature to abandon all he had and to subject himself to the life of torture and persecution and eventual death. So, by the way, we were thinking about this today. Weird. Right? You're trying to think about that. Universal probability bound? Yeah. So, we were talking about that with evolution. That really more applies to, what the likelihood is that all of this could have happened by accident. So if you remember when we talked about evolution, the universal probability bound says that if something is so unlikely that it hits this number, that not only is it completely unlikely, in fact, the opposite has to be true. Right? So when you start to weigh historical evidence, and this was Hume's weight for a miracle, was unless it is more miraculous that a miracle didn't occur than did occur, then you have to negate the miracle. So in other words, if the evidence is so heavy in favor of the miracle that it would have to be a miracle for the miracle not to have occurred, You guys following me?
No.
Okay, try it one more time.
Miracle.
So you have all this evidence for a miracle.
Yes.
Okay. What's more miraculous, that the miracle occurred or all this evidence is false? Okay, I would say it's more miraculous that all this evidence is false. Right, and so therefore, reasonably, you're forced to believe that the miracle of the resurrection occurred. With me? In other words, it's more miraculous that all this evidence we have for Jesus existing and being crucified by the Romans is just a bunch of made-up stuff. You have to, first of all, you have to buy into a piece of that. And if you don't buy into a piece of that, then you have to deny all the evidence that Jesus' followers had experiences with the risen Christ. And not only followers, but skeptics. You have to deny all of this. And if you deny, Josephus and what the scriptures say about St. James, you have to deny all the evidence we have about St. Paul. And then you have to, this is what we're talking about here, the launch of the church, that has, again, bedeviled historians. They just can't figure out why so many people would join a movement with no guarantee of political gain whatsoever, or really no earthly gain, and in fact, quite the opposite, a lot of times persecution. Nobody gets this. Nobody can explain this historically. The launch of the church, and it's based on the resurrection. See, really, Jesus had some followers when he was alive, but really it was the event of the resurrection that launched the church. No historian would disagree with that. What launched the church was not Christ's birth, but his death and resurrection. That's what launched the church. Now, theologically, we say the church launched in the Garden of Eden, really. Okay. That's the theologically. Historically, the historians are going to say the Christian movement began because of the resurrection of Christ. Am I making sense to everybody here? The difference between the two? Okay. All right. Now, so when you think about the universal probability bond, what's more likely, what's easier to do? Discount all of this evidence or parts of it, or to believe the miracle happened? I'll take Hume's challenge any day. And in fact, I have. Okay, this is one of the things that the Holy Spirit used to bring me back to faith. So I needed a reason. Right? Needed to make sense. Okay, let's go to this early testimony. This one is one of the more compelling things to me. So, just for the sake of argument, we're going to say year zero. You guys ever see that show?
See what?
Year zero.
I think there's a show called, is it called Year Zero? It's got Jack Black in it. It's kind of a spoof on. It's about
the name of that movie is.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's kind of this guy stumbling through history, and they kind of go through some of the biblical narratives like Cain and Abel and Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's pretty funny actually. Anyway, so Christ is born. All right. Traditionally, we say 33 AD. Christ crucified. I'll just throw it in here. About AD 50, St. Paul pens 1 Corinthians. Okay. The section, the first few verses of 1 Corinthians 15 are largely regarded by scholars to be what is known as creedal material. All right? So now, no question St. Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, but just like authors of the New Testament would use Old Testament passages in their writings, St. Paul was using this creed that most New Testament textual scholars would agree was much earlier than 1 Corinthians. We even believe this at Claremont. I mean, there was just so much evidence that this was something earlier. It's like if Pastor Petersen is giving a sermon and he quotes from the Catechism, right? I mean, it's still his sermon, but he's quoting. We know he's quoting when he's quoting from the Catechism. We all have the Catechism memorized, right? Yes, of course we do. Okay. Same deal. So when St. Paul started this, for what I received, I pass on to you as first importance. That's a signal. It's like saying, we should fear and love God. We know we're talking about the Ten Commandments, right? We should fear and love God so that everybody knows, because we have the first part of the Catechism memorized, the Ten Commandments, that, we're talking Ten Commandments here. Same thing, St. Paul. Treadle Material possibly could have dated somewhere around 36. So you could say all of this. You could say, yes, we have abundant evidence that Jesus was crucified by the Romans. Jesus' followers experienced this. We have skeptics being converted, very compelling evidence. Certainly launched the Christian religion as we know it historically. But we really just don't have anything, dating very close to the time of the event. Somebody might say. Nothing until St. Paul starts writing. By the way, the Gospels are believed to have come later. So, real quick here. Generally, now, I get Lutheran yelling at me about this. So this is what I learned when I was in seminary. So it's okay. Check with whoever you want on this. But basically, you have St. Paul. The Paul, or what they call, starting about 50 AD and following. Right. And we at Dallas, pretty much, Dallas, Claremont. There's not a huge dispute on this. It's just a matter of dating. We all thought that 1 Thessalonians was the first Pauline letter. Okay, fine, whatever, doesn't matter. The higher textual critics will break up Paul into two categories. Paul and Pseudo Paul. Yeah. False Paul, which was not unheard of, but at the same time, it's not a. To me, it's not a huge deal, but a lot of people will try to allege, well, that's Pseudo Paul, or that's Deutero Paul, or something, whatever they want to call it. And they'll try to say, well, it doesn't carry as much weight because it was way later, somebody using Paul's name, et cetera, wrote this. Well, look, again, the whole higher textual criticism thing is just doesn't hold any water with me, because at the end of the day, it's a subjective judgment on a text as to who the author is. So, for instance, you look at say, take 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, very different documents, and I would see why people might say, if you read the Greek, you disagree. Okay, I could see why people might say that First Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians might have been written by two different authors. Okay, see why you might say that. But, hang on, I'll let you go.
Because we've never read a book.
Well, right. But go read. I'll give you a copy of one of my graduate papers, and you read that, and then go read one of my Federalist articles. Okay, and you'll be like, oh, this must have been written by two different authors. You're like, 1,000 years later, somebody's going to come along and read with my name on it, my graduate paper, and then read one of my Federalist articles. They go, oh, it must have been written by two different authors. I've been accused of plagiarizing because I'll get on Facebook and somebody will be arguing something and I'll go into scholarly mode. I'll start writing all scholarly. They're like, oh, where'd you get that from? I'm like, it's mine. Like, no, it's not. You don't write like that. See? So anyway, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, hey, pick an author,
Right.
and I'll give you 2 books of theirs that are totally different. And it doesn't matter. Yeah. Have you read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
How about The Weight of Glory?
Yeah.
Could those have been written by the same guy? Yes.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
Right. Right. So they get a little crazy. So anyway, that's for free. Here's what I really wanted to get at. So so let's say Pseudo Paul is after the Gospels, but we're not going to worry about that because we don't believe in that nonsense. Then really you have the Gospels coming in, probably Mark. I mean, more than likely Matthew, then Luke, then John. Okay, so our Gospels are ordered in the New Testament. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You know, they say Mark is earlier because it's not as developed as Matthew. Whatever. Okay, it's completely subjective, but that's what they say. So Mark, we're pretty certain is around 60. Now, liberal scholars won't give it that date. Why? Because Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple. When was the temple destroyed? Caleb, when was the temple destroyed? AD 70?
Oh.
69, 70. Okay? So if Mark has the destruction of the temple in his gospel, well, it has to be after AD 70. Well, that's stupid. There's no reason for that. In fact, there's more evidence internal to Mark that would predate the destruction of the temple. Matthew, roughly the same. Luke, people throw as late as 125, which is dumb. Have to put, and here's why. Because, where am I here? P52 is a fragment of St. John's Gospel, 18. It's about the size of a credit card. They can read both front and back, so they know it's St. John's Gospel. The historians, the archaeologists, date P52 no later than 89. And maybe as early as 80. And that's a copy, right? Remember, we don't have the originals. That's a copy of John. So if they date P52 at 90, and it's a copy, St. John could have been written around 70 or earlier, right? 75. We have a copy floating around. I can't remember. I have to look at where we found P52. It was somewhere away from where the original would have been written. Some distance.
So it wasn't on Patmos?
No. No, it wasn't. But that kind of messes you up for dating Luke so late, although scholars still do it, because they're idiots. Anyway, so there's that. And then, so you guys know how the New Testament's organized, right? Gospels, St. Paul's stuff, general epistles, right? Does that make sense? Gospels, St. Paul, general epistles. So you go through, Gospels, Romans, all the way through Philemon, right? And then you get Hebrews, right? Which, who knows who wrote Hebrews? Some people say St. Paul. I don't know. Could be, doesn't matter. Then you get Hebrews, James, etc. Right? The general epistles. These vary in dating. Pastor Curtis yelled at me because I said that at the winter retreat, he didn't yell at me, he just disputed me because I said that I put forth the notion that St. James was one of the earliest. In fact, maybe it was the earliest epistle.
They'll do that.
Yeah. He's like, well, what evidence do you have for that? I'm like, well, he's like, you're just talking about internal nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. I'm like, whatever. whatever. This is why he didn't even give me the time of day. Okay. But anyway, I think according, I mean, this is internal. It is internal evidence, but I also think that I think that's helpful to do that theologically. I think you can make the argument that St. James was early. Yes, internal. Okay, we got 1 minute. Hang in there. But that's helpful theologically, because when St. James says, so we see that we're not justified by faith alone. I mean, these are his words verbatim. That presents a problem for our theology, does it not? Because we believe that salvation is by faith alone. So when we look at St. James, one argument we can make is that St. James was using that term justification, this verb right here, dikaio, that verb right there, to be justified, I justify, is what that means. That term, justification, which is our big Lutheran term, St. James was using it in a different way than we would use it. Okay? But in conjunction with how we would use it. So to say that the notion that you can be saved, that you can have faith, that you can be justified, and still go running around acting like a complete heathen would be debunked by St. James. Okay. We're going to finish this next week, and I'm not sure it's going to be a surprise what we're going to move on to next week. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure yet. There's a couple options. I've got some requests in. If you guys have any other requests where we move to next, because I think I'm going to move into some church history stuff. Yeah. Talk about denominations and that sort of thing. Okay? All right, we all got to go to choir and whatever else we got to do today. See you later.
You have cameras today, right?
I do?
I think so.
Shoot, I completely forgot about that.
I could do it if you wanted me to.
No,